Good afternoon. My name is Delegate Maggie McIntosh, Chair of Appropriations Committee. And today, the Appropriations Committee will be voting on a number of bills in anticipation of crossover. We'll begin with House Bill 417.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 417, Employees Retirement and Pension System Re-employment Earnings Limitations. This emergency administration bill exempts retirees of the Maryland Health Department and the Department of Labor who have been rehired by the same agencies for specific purposes from a statutory earnings limitation that applies to retirees of the state retirement and pension system. Specifically, if a health department employee is rehired for no more than 3 years to assist in the administration of federally funded grants related to COVID-19, or if a labor department rehiree is in for no more than 3 years to assist with the administration of unemployment benefits related to the COVID-19 pandemic, they are exempt from an offset to their retirement benefits if their earnings exceed statutory limits. And there's one amendment that's technical. That's the bill, Madam Chair.
It says favorable on my list. Is there a amendment?
Yep. Yes, it came out of committee favorable with 9-0.
All right,
Unanimous.
but are there any amendments?
There's one that's technical.
Okay. All right. On the amendment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
On the bill as amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. House Bill 739,
This is a local bill, move favorable.
second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. House Bill 1018.
Madam Chair, House Bill 1018 is the Public Safety and Behavioral Health Improvement Act by Delegate Carey. You all remember this. This was the bill that shored up resources for the Behavioral Health and Public Safety Center of Excellence within GOCAP, or not GOCAP anymore. It's the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. So it included grant funding for local jurisdictions to help with different health initiatives, expanded training for 911 call centers, and established transparency and reporting requirements. But there are 5 amendments to this bill. The first one is technical. The second one strikes provisions related to peer support criteria that were duplicative. The third one removes provisions requiring a statewide outcome measurement system and changes it to an internal agency measurement system in consultation with Behavioral Health Administration. The fourth amendment adds provisions to enhance 911 operator training to include behavioral health issues and crisis responsive services. And the fifth amendment removes the requirement for judicial compliance rates, as judges already have discretion in sentencing, and criminal justice disparity data is already required by the bill. I would say move the amendments, but I also know that there's a hand.
Yes, Delegate Christ.
Thank you, guys. I noticed that just in my notes here, it says the courts are opposed to this, and I know there are several amendments. After we take these amendments, do you know what their position might still be?
Yeah, I know we have worked on it with the judicial because they were concerned about that Fifth Amendment where we removed that judicial compliance rates. It's a slippery slope to actually put in there for them to comply. And so we removed that because they already have discretion in their sentencing, and criminal justice disparity data is already required by the bill. So once we did that, they were fine with the bill.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
They are fine with the bill.
Yes.
Okay, on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? On the bill as amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, we're gonna move to House Bill 893, Calvert County.
Just another one of these annual bond authority bills. Move favorable.
Does it have amendments? No,
It does.
it does, doesn't it?
All right. What are the amendments, council? I apologize.
Yeah, so you want to move the amendments, right?
Yes, move the amendments on the local.
Changes the number.
Changes the number.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed on the bill as amended? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
In the opposition, we have Delegate Kittleman
Okay.
with 20 in the favorable and 1 in the opposition, 1 excused and 1 absent. The bill passes.
Okay, House Bill 1446, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the bill to mandate $10 million in appropriations to universities at Shady Grove for their workforce development programs. There is one amendment to it. The amendment basically says this bill only goes into effect if they do not receive funding in the 2023 budget, which is something that I know is an ongoing conversation. Would ask to move the amendments.
Okay, we have a question, Delegate Valentina Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're on the bill, I would just ask the good delegate, with the hopes that it passes, that part of their workforce development program, that they reach back to DHS and try to also incorporate some of the temporary cash assistance recipients that need workforce development. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed on the bill as amended? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you very much. House Bill 907.
Hold on, Madam Chair, we have some opposition.
To
the bill?
Sorry, slow it down there, Madam Chair. 3, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We have Delegate Mangione, Delegate McKay, Delegate Novotny, as well as Delegate Kittleman in the
4.
negative. We have 4 in the negative,
Okay,
17 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative, 1 excused, 1 absent. The bill passes.
okay, we'll move to 907 now.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. House Bill 907 makes an exemption within the Articles of Ethics within the state of Maryland for employees of the University of Maryland Baltimore campus to be able to raise funds for the University of Maryland Medical Center Corporation. There's no amendments. Move the bill.
Okay. On the bill, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. House Bill 580.
Thank you, Madam Chair. HB 580. Maryland Transit Administration Police Collective Bargaining. There are 2 amendments. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 requires that collective bargaining rights comply with federal law and define supervisors, as well as require supervisors and sergeants to be put into separate bargaining units. If you remember, this bill expands the list of Maryland Transit Authority employees that are authorized to collectively bargain. Move the amendments.
All right, on the, yes, Delegate Novotny, do you have a question?
I have a question now, or we can move the amendments and I can ask a question on the bill either way,
All
ma'am.
right, on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Delegate Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's my understanding that any state employee can form a union under the state pensions article. How does this differ than unions created in different fashions?
It's authorizing the collectively bargain delegate. We do this all the time.
So totally understandable. How does this, can they not collectively bargain at this point? Maybe
Nope.
Delegate
They cannot.
Corman has a more succinct answer. Can they not collectively bargain right now?
No, they can't. That's why we're doing the bill. This authorizes them to collectively bargain.
be able to, if they so choose, right?
if they so choose. Thank you.
Woman's hand is up.
Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to note for the subcommittee personnel that MDOT's under a different system than the rest of state government when it comes to their legal provisions as well.
All right.
So the general provision that Delegate Novotny referenced likely does not apply to MDOT.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, on the amendments. Oh, no, we adopted those. All those in favor of House Bill 580 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have opposition.
Move the bills amended.
All right. So we have Metzger, Ranjani, Novotny, Grice, McKay, Kettleman. All right.
So sorry about that. 15 in the affirmative, 6 in the negative, 1 excused and 1 absent. The bill passes.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's move to House Bill 1023.
House Bill 1023 was the bill requested by DLS for the racial equity impact notes, the information from the police, from law enforcement agencies. There are 2 amendments. The first one is technical. The second amendment requires law enforcement agencies to collect de-identified demographic information on their employee roster, requires more detail on use of force incidents, changes the dates on some reporting by the Maryland State Police, requires the state police to enter a data sharing agreement with the Department of Legislative Services, and requires law enforcement agencies to submit use of force data to the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. And before hands go up, all of the amendments were fully endorsed by the Maryland State Police. So move the amendments, Madam Chair.
Second.
On the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the amendments? All right. On the bill, Delegate Grice.
Madam Chair, so the MSP, they're on board. Do we know where the State Police Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association might be on this? Along with probably our county and municipal governments, MACO and MML.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Ken, were you about to answer that?
Yeah, all of the agencies who were at the bill hearing or who had information where they wanted to have amendments added to the bill, all of their concerns were satisfied. All of the agencies have been working hand in glove with the Department of Legislative Services to make sure that all of the information that they will need to send is done in a way that comports with a way that they're comfortable with.
Okay. So are they supportive of the bill or are they just not opposed at this point? Do you know?
They're supportive. I actually spoke with Commander Tom Williams from Maryland State Police yesterday, and Delegate Bridges has also been in touch with the commander. The commander actually wanted to step up the level of engagement. So it was his idea to have a memorandum of understanding between MSP and DLS.
Okay. All right. Very good. I'll vote for this bill. Thank you.
Delegate Valentino Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an issue that I've been working on for many, many years when I first got here. And so the question I have is, will they be collecting data on the stops or just on actual confirmed interactions with the public? Or will they collect racial data on the number of, they'll stop a lot of people and let them go? And
yeah, there is information that will be collected on so-called race-based traffic stops, which are already collected by the MSAC. That information will be included as well.
Thank you. That's a big step forward. Thank you. Thank you for the bill.
Okay, we've adopted the amendments on the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Delegate Beitzel.
We have Delegate Beitzel in the opposition, Delegate Mangione, Delegate Novotny.
I had a question, Madam Chair. I couldn't log on. I just got logged on. So
Yeah, I noticed that. Go ahead.
which bill are you working on?
1023, sir.
All right, I think I raised my hand. I think I'll stay there.
Okay, that's fine.
We have 4 in the opposition, 17 in the favorable, 4 in the opposition, and 1 excused. The bill passes.
Okay. House Bill 1205. Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1205 duly assigned to HGO and Appropriations, State Government Information Technology and Cybersecurity Related Infrastructure Modernization Act of 2022. It was favorable unanimously out of HGO. There are a number of amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. HGO unanimously added all of its members as co-sponsors. Amendment number 2 removes MSA, or the Maryland Stadium Authority Bond Authority, at the request of MSA, alters memberships of the statewide reporting framework and oversight committee, and requires the commission to review and provide recommendations on DO-IT security standards. It also requires assessment reports every 3 years, establishes a local cybersecurity support fund for cybersecurity preparedness, and exempts smaller DO-IT cybersecurity procurements from needing BPW approval, but requires an annual report on these procurements to BPW. Move the amendments.
Okay, on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? On the bill as amended. Delegate Mangione.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did this say 1.5 billion was the bond cost?
So
Or is
the
that,
amendments, thanks for the question, Delegate. The original bill, and given this a couple times in HGO and happy to explain it now, the original version was the drafter's best first attempt, and we didn't have time to amend it. So the version that you're looking at when it comes to a fiscal note still applies the Maryland Stadium Authority's bonding authority of 1.5 billion that was in the original bill. The amendments strip out MSA and the bonding authority. So there is no $1.5 billion assessed, but it's still in there because in terms of the first bill that was presented, the amendments changed that.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, on the bill. As amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Delegate Novotny.
In the opposition, we have Delegate Novotny. We have 20 in the favorable, 1 in the opposition, and 1 excused. The bill passes.
Okay. House Bill 1082, Public Health.
House Bill 1082, I believe we are secondary on. HGO just passed this out 16-6. June, are there any amendments on this?
Yes, there is an amendment.
Can you please describe it? I don't have it in front of me.
Sure. It defines plain language and public communication, and it strikes a requirement on state agencies to give preference to contractors that are approved by the state's Consumer Health Information Hub, which the bill establishes.
Okay. On the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, come on.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, on the bill as amended, 1082. All those in favor signify by saying. Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Opposed? There we go.
In the opposition, we have Delegates Mangione, Novotny, Grist, Beitzel,
I can't get the hand won't raise. There it is.
You want it to raise?
There it is.
Metzger, and Delegate McKay. Are you good?
Yes, ma'am. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank
Yay
you.
vote.
15-6 with 1 excused. The bill passes.
Madam Chair, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I didn't want to raise my hand because I was afraid I was going to end up in the opposition.
Right.
Just before we go to the floor, and it may be my fault for not knowing, but it's called the Marilyn Herschel S. Horowitz Center. And I was just wondering the significance of Mr. Herschel Horowitz. I'm assuming it's significant, but I don't know.
I don't know. HGO is taking this bill to the floor. They're primary.
Yeah, no, I just thought it would be a piece of
Yeah.
history or something since we're naming the institute after him. Okay,
We'll have to Google that.
Yes.
good idea. Sorry.
House Bill 293.
293 is also a bill we are secondary on from HGO. This bill will help set up the 988 Trust Fund. Just a reminder to everyone, 988 is the National Emergency Mental Health Number that is going nationwide, that is replacing the suicide hotline. And this trust fund is designed to help the Maryland Mental Health Association to staff that line. There is an amendment. I do have that one. The amendment adds sponsors and cuts the appropriation from 10 million to 5.5 million. This bill was voted out of HGO unanimously, and by the look of it, it sounds like everybody on the committee jumped on as co-sponsors.
Got it. All right, on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I might say that the funding for this is in the Senate bill, budget bill that's coming our way. They have included it. All right, on the bill.
Oh, just a question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
How difficult would it be to add sponsors to our committee as well?
I would not recommend doing that because then we got to send the bill.
Okay, I don't want to do it then. Yeah, I don't want to muck this thing up. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Beitzel.
Whoops, did I raise my hand?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. I was going to have a question, but it was answered, so I'm good.
All right, on the bill, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, last bill, House Bill 656. Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 656 is the Safe Access for All or Safe Roads Act of 2022. We are secondary on it from ENT. The bill's been pretty heavily amended. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 removes a requirement for the State Highway Administration to do a study on state intersections and road characteristics. It also changes the mandated appropriation to lower numbers only for FY24, and also has sort of intent language about those numbers increasing based on the availability of federal dollars. And the bill also includes, before the amendments, a study on its SHA staffing issues. I would move the amendments.
Second.
You have a question on the amendments, Delegate Grice?
Oh, no, I was just going to ask Delegate Corman how they voted in the other committee. That's all.
So
on the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Wait, Madam Chair, question, please.
Yeah,
Am I unmuted?
yeah, you're unmuted.
Okay. Where's administration stand on this?
I believe I have to double check, actually. Ken, do you know if they put in informational testimony or opposition? I think they were informational only. Ken, you're on mute. And while Ken's looking that up, Delegate Grice, ENT, I don't believe has voted yet. We're voting now with the amendments because of when we're meeting to vote to avoid another meeting.
Most likely to be embarrassed by turning your camera.
Ken?
Yeah, and to answer the question, so the agency was informational on this. They did originally have some issues with the comprehensive road study that was originally part of the bill. That was probably the main thrust of their objections in the beginning. And when I say objection, I'm not saying formal objections, but just issues that they had. And that part is actually struck from the bill in its current form.
As you know, Delegate Beitzel, they often put information only testimony in, even though we might know their true feelings about a bill.
So it is, I think I heard that there is some federal funding or something to cover this too, or where is this highway user funds that being used for this purpose or?
So it's not highway user funds. Highway user funds, Delegate, have a very particular meaning. That's money that you're guaranteed because of mandate. So it's not highway user revenue. Now there is base revenue in the Department of Transportation that can go to a lot of things. And yes, some of this money would come from that. We cut back in the mandate in the bill considerably. We basically took the 5 specified programs, and instead of the numbers the sponsor wanted, we plussed them each up by 1.5 million from what's in the budget. So 1.5 million for each program. And then said beyond that, we would sort of expect to see increases based on what comes in federal funds. So if there's a 20% increase in formula funding that ADA retrofits would be eligible for, under the federal infrastructure law, we would expect to see that 20% flow through to ADA retrofits under this bill.
So there could be federal infrastructure funding come in to support this bill.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Grice.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about the follow-up question here. It does, there really is no fiscal note to this, but what it does do is it just instructs MDOT how to spend certain amounts of money. Is that correct? It gives them less flexibility.
It takes $7.5 million in one fiscal year, $7.5 million out of their, I mean, just taking SHA road preservation alone, that's about $790 million a year. So it takes $7.5 million for 1 year and tells them how to spend that. And can I just say, since we might come to this issue again later, that it's really unclear to me why I have more to say about every deer that's sold in Washington County or every deer that's hunted in Montgomery County than we do over transportation infrastructure investment in the state of Maryland.
Duly noted.
Duly noted. Delegate Beitzel? No. Okay, your hand's down. All right, on the bill as amended.
Madam Chair, I think Delegate Solomon has a question.
Oh, Delegate Solomon, I'm sorry.
No, Madam Chair, I just wanted to add on to Delegate Corman's comments. There's nothing in here that dictates this go to one county versus another. This is for pedestrian safety improvements and road improvements across the entire state. So I think that's an important thing to note. We know we all have pedestrian safety. We've had pedestrian deaths in probably every single corner in every single county, unfortunately, in the state. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that as well.
All right. All right.
Madam Chair, can I just ask? I'm actually still curious about this. So, is this money that's going to be who actually who makes the decision on how that money is being spent? Because I do like the parts because we do have sidewalks and pedestrian that right of ways that that do need funding, obviously. So, who would control that spending?
Yeah, so each of the 5 programs specified here are in the CTP, which you can look up online, and it's all set by the Maryland Department of Transportation through their annual process.
Okay. All right, thanks. And this does come out of the Transportation Trust Fund.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Beitzel, you still have your hand up. You okay?
Is my hand up? All right.
It is.
I can lower my hand, but may I just make a comment? I mean, I think we should be permitted to ask these questions.
Oh, yeah,
I haven't had a chance to look at this, and I don't know what it's got to do with deer hunting in Washington County, but I'm just trying to satisfy myself that I understand what the issue is, and I was prepared to vote for it, so I'm not being argumentative or obstreperous or anything else. Delegate Corman, I just was asked a few questions, and so thank you for responding, and I appreciate the answers, and so thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, let's vote on the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
In the opposition, we have Delegates Novotny, Delegate Grice, Delegate Mangione, and Delegate Kittleman.
Okay, I think that completes our voting list for the afternoon. We'll probably see these bills out on the floor tomorrow. Committee, and now we're going to move to reporting out the committee decisions on the budget. I'm going to have each subcommittee and their respective vice chair, if they so choose, help them read out the decisions, at the end of which we will take a vote on the subcommittee decisions. I will let the vice chair of the committee handle the full committee decisions. And we'll take a vote on that and take a vote on the whole budget, okay? Close out the year. Let me say a couple of things before we begin. Actually, I'll say my remarks before we vote on the whole budget. Erase that. Why don't we begin with the Education and Economic Development Subcommittee? Chair Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the members of the subcommittee, Vice Chair Solomon, Delegate Forbes, Delegate Grice, Delegate Novotny, Delegate Smith, and our great committee staff, Michelle Lambert, and committee support, Francisca Dale, the wonderful budget analysts, Sarah Baker, Patrick Frank, Andrew Gray, Emily Haskell, Laura Hyde, Ian Klein, Samuel Quist, Morgan Smith, and Ian Wagner, and Madeline Ross, who helped edit this document. Beginning with the budget decisions, starting on page 1 for Historic St. Mary's Commission, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to add language restricting funds pending a performance audit of the financial management practices of the commission. For the Maryland Department of Labor, on page 2, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to add language restricting funds pending a report on providing our Workers' Education and Readiness Apprenticeship Act. On page 3 and moving on to page 4, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on unemployment insurance processes. Also on page 4, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to add language restricting a portion of the workforce development funding for oversight purposes. On page 5 and continue on to page 6, the subcommittee rejected the Senate narrative, forming several apprenticeship work groups.
Decision documents.
I think someone's got their is not muted. Could we make sure everybody's muted except our chair of the subcommittee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Turn to the Maryland State Department of Education headquarters on page 7 through page 13. The subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt 10 pieces of narrative requests and reports on accounting practice, state education agency, federal stimulus funds, virtual learning, Maryland School for the Deaf, personnel and vacancies, a Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Plan, child care stabilization grants and processing times, the Early Childhood Data System Modernization Project, which is modified to request additional information, and environmental literacy standards. Page 14 and 15, the Maryland State Department of Education aid to education, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to add 2 pieces of language restricting the funds pending a report on maintenance of effort calculations and the autism waiver wait list. Beginning on the bottom of page 15 through 19, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the non-public placement program, an update on pathways and technology early college high school program, and funding adequacy in the child care scholarship program. The subcommittee also modified Senate narrative on pages 17 and 18 concerning quarterly reports on the child care scholarship program. Moving to page 19 and continuing on to page 20, the subcommittee added language specifying how deficiency appropriation for child care stabilization grants should be prioritized. This language is in line with our work on House Bill 89. On page 21 and 22 for the Maryland State Department of Education funding for education organizations for aid to non-public schools program, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in adding annual language modifying the distribution of funding is in compliance with the discrimination and employment statute, but rejected the Senate action to change language regarding the program eligibility requirements and concurred with the DLS recommendation in that regard. On page 22 and continuing to page 23, in this same program, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative requesting a report on federal funding for non-public schools. Beginning on page 23 and continuing through page 27 for Boost, the subcommittee added annual language for participation and eligibility requirements and added language regarding scholarship eligibility.
Mr. Chair, are we going to wait until the end, or Madam Chair, I should ask, are we going to wait until the end of your presentation to pull out different pages? Is that the plan? Okay.
Yes, yes, delegate.
I appreciate it.
The boost action is on page 24, delegate, just for the end. On page 28, for the non-public school nursing program, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate action. However, the subcommittee has reconsidered and would like to concur with the governor's allowance. This action also has a color page for your consideration, which adds annual budget bill language for the non-public school program. So I think what happened here is we were hoping to supplement, not supplant, the federal funding in this program. I actually think the Senate may have intended that as well. So the correction here is just to supplement rather than supplant the funding. On page 29 through 34, for the Interagency Commission on School Construction, the subcommittee added revised budget language to restrict funds pending reports on the implementation of Chapter 14 of the 2018 and the statewide facilities assessment. Added annual language on the non-public safety program, recognizing the intent for the program to serve both public and non-public schools, modified the Senate action on charter and contract school facilities, concur with the Senate regarding narrative for the school safety grant program and funding for the statewide facility assessment, and adopted new narrative for report on renewable energy fueled school in Western Maryland. On page 35, for the Accountability and Implementation Board, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative requesting report on the management for results measures. Page 36, for the University of Maryland, Baltimore campus subcommittee rejected Senate language restricting funds for the grant. On page 37, for Bowie State, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative requesting an update on its nursing program. For Frostburg State University, on page 38, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative requesting a report on increasing the capacity of its physician assistance program. On page 39 and continuing all the way through page 45, for the Maryland Higher Education Commission, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to add language restricting funds pending a status on corrective actions related to a recent audit. Added language restricting funds pending a report on the reorganization of MHEC. Concur with the Senate to adopt two pieces of narrative requesting reports on financial aid by expected family contribution and progress toward the 55% completion goal. Rejected narrative requesting a report on awarding a credit for prior learning. Adopted narrative requesting a report on increasing participation in post-secondary education. Modified Senate narrative requesting a report on MICU institutions supporting the state's higher education goals. Adopted narrative requesting a report on the admission policies of MICU institutions. Concur with the Senate in adding intent language concerning the veterans of the Afghan Iraq conflict scholarship, and also concur with the Senate to adopt two pieces of narrative requesting reports on the impact of the credit completion requirement and the post-secondary outcomes of the next generation scholars. Page 47 for higher ed. The first item is technical and reflects actions previously taken by the subcommittee. The subcommittee also concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative language requesting faculty workload reports. For Baltimore City Community College, on page 47-48, subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt three pieces of narrative requesting reports on the realignment plan, information technology infrastructure plan, and enrollment in the Mayor's Scholars Program. The subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting a report on full-time faculty, the college's faculty contract system, and institutional realignment, item number 6. On page 49 through 52 for the Department of Commerce, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending reports on the department's equity plan and Arts Council funding formula. The subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt two pieces of narrative requesting reports on the small minority and women-owned business account and More Jobs for Maryland program. The subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting a report on support for child care providers. Finally, the subcommittee modified Senate language to restrict tourism funding for additional grantees. Move to adopt the report as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion to adopt the report. At this point, do we have any recommendations that people want to pull out and vote on separately? Any actions? Delegate Grice, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if we can go back to page 24, that was the boost program.
Okay, we'll pull that out, okay, and we'll vote on that separately. Anybody else have another item they want to vote on separately? Okay, let's adopt the report with exception of the boost program, and we'll come back to that. All in favor of the report for the Education Economic Committee, Subcommittee, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? That was a great report. Thank you very much, Chairman and Vice Chair and committee members. You have worked really hard, not only this year, but the entire term. Now let's deal with the one recommendation on the boost program. You want to say anything, Delegate Grice?
Just very quickly, I mean, this is a program that many of us do support, and I know that that will be by way of attrition. They're just gradually eliminating the program over time, and certainly we would like to see the program restored. So we just want to go on record, letting
Yes.
folks know that we do support the program. That's all.
Yes. All right,
But I do thank our chair and our committee for another great session. So,
Delegate Valentino Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to also commend the committee on their work, and only because I was on the subcommittee. Is the amendment completely phasing out the boost program? I'm trying to read it quickly.
Yeah,
I
it's
just
the same, Delegate, you've, the same thing, I think this is your 4th or 5th year on appropriations. It's the
It
same
is.
thing, same thing we've done every year.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't recall the
Oh,
specific.
yeah, it phases out the program. It keeps, it does, Delegate. It phases out the program. It keeps the students that are in the program in as long as they need to matriculate through school and the schools that they're in. So we're not going to throw any child out of their existing school, but it does restrict any new students from joining.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair, if I can then just on the record make a comment about the program.
Sure.
Thank you. So you're right. Each year we've participated in this debate, and on behalf of at least a good part of the district that I have in Prince George's County, well, we've put a lot of money and ensured significant funding, and there's great hope and optimism for improvement in the school systems. In my district, we have 2 middle schools that are failing, and we have significant difficulties in our high schools funding important programs like we talked about today, art and sports and chorus and theater. And the students in my district don't have an option to pick another school. I know that the city is fortunate that they can sometimes get themselves to the really good 2 cities and good schools in Baltimore City. But I have 25 scholarships at Elizabeth Ann Seton, which is an all-girls, predominantly minority school. And these girls get to participate in a chorus, they get to participate in field hockey, and they get to participate in a lot of programs that our public schools were not yet able to fund. And those programs offer them the opportunity not only to have a very unique high school experience, but to get to the types of colleges that they might otherwise get. And so for the 25 scholarships for these young women, it's about $143,000. And I will vote against the amendment because the idea that 25 more girls might not be able to have that opportunity. This is not a school that can significantly fundraise or create the endowments like some of the other private schools that we see. And so with that, I would have hoped that with all of the money, all of the funding, all of the great work that we're doing in improving our public schools, that we would have allowed this small opportunity for some people to avail themselves of the very special things that they can get offered in this type of schooling that they cannot get in the public schools. So I will be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Delegate.
Thank you. My only comment, and I don't want to, flame anything here, is that what you just described, Delegate Valentino Smith, is a sad commentary that we obviously have not been funding our public schools to the degree that we need to. And that was witnessed today by the remarks of Delegate Smith on the floor about the arts funding in Baltimore City. There are just subdivisions, 4 of which, if I recall, that have not met adequacy under the Thornton Commission, and we are very much looking forward to the full rollout of the blueprint, where these schools will finally be able to not only satisfy all the COMAR regulations, but also know that that includes the arts. We're very happy to hear these other private schools have those programs, but we don't want all schools, including public schools, to have it. But I will be supporting the subcommittee's position on this bill as I have in the past. So,
Madam Chair, would the subcommittee consider not phasing out until after we have the Kerwin in full funding and full support, so that then we don't have to risk that the loss of these scholarships will prevent some of these girls and boys from having those opportunities?
No, thank you, Delegate. The subcommittee has voted. The action is before you. For the reasons Delegate McIntosh stated, this funding is needed for the phase in of the blueprint. And moreover, with the studies, and I know we'll get into this on the floor. So, and I know this committee has considered this every year, so didn't feel the need to really get into it here, but studies have suggested that these voucher programs just don't lead to better outcomes. They just don't. The families that leave the schools are families that are already succeeding in the public schools by and large. So, we'll talk about it more on the floor, but this is a final action of the subcommittee. It is the recommendation of the subcommittee, so we're going to stand by it. Thank you.
and I would add Delegate Smith, Valentino Smith, that no student that that's currently enrolled in one of these schools will lose their scholarship. That's the point of this the committee doing it the way it is. No one will be kicked out because of this action. No one.
And that
No,
is very intentional.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee. I just, again, as you know, I appreciate your indulgence for the passion that I have for the students and the phase out of the program, and my disappointment at it. Thank you.
Right. So on the recommendation to phase out the boost program over a period of what would be 12 years, leaving all students that are currently in the program, but having it phased out. The subcommittee has recommended this, and I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor of that recommendation signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please raise your hand. Sheree, you got that?
Is my hand
Yes, ma'am.
raised?
We have, in the opposition, we have delegates Novotny, McKay, Mangione, Grice, Valentino Smith, and Beitzel.
That's good.
Oh, I didn't see, you don't have your hand raised, delegate.
It won't raise.
Oh,
All right, well, thank you. All right, and so the count is?
the count is 14-8 with 1 excused.
Okay, thank you. Very good. And again, subcommittee, terrific work. We're now going to move to Health and Social Services Subcommittee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of Appropriations. I'm going to be presenting the report from the Subcommittee on Health and Social Services. I will do the first part, and then I will have my Vice Chair take over at the Department of the report on the Human Services. So first, I'd like to thank the members of the subcommittee, Vice Chair Delegate Valentino Smith, Delegate Shanika Henson, Delegate Nino Mangione, and Delegate Pat Young. I'd like to thank their committee staff, June Chung, the budget analysts, Andrew Garrison, Emily Haskell, Grace Pedersen, Samuel Quist, Morgan Smith, Ann Wagner, and Tanya Zimmerman. And I'd like to thank Hugh Norco for helping to edit this report. Turning to the subcommittee's actions, we start on page 1 with the Department of Disabilities. The subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative pertaining to the Universal Services Trust Fund. Going to page 2, in the Department of Aging, the subcommittee modified the Senate action to request the inclusion of demographic and geographic data in a report on program utilization and wait lists. The subcommittee also concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative requesting requesting data on new programs. I also like to point out, this is a little veering off the script, but we are not cutting the Department of Aging this year in any way. Want to make sure everybody heard that. On page 4, for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, the subcommittee modified Senate narrative requesting a report on pending and open cases and investigator staffing to provide data by case type and staff to case ratios. On page 5, the subcommittee adopted new narrative on the case resolution process within the commission. On page 6, in the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, the subcommittee concurred with 2 Senate actions, budget bill language on interfacility hospital transportation and the other on emergency medical technicians shortages. The actions pertaining to the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange are on page 8, where the subcommittee concurred with 2 pieces of narrative adopted by the Senate on waiver applications and the reinsurance program. The subcommittee's actions on the Maryland Department of Health begin on page 9 with the MDH Office of the Secretary budget. Subcommittee concurred with 2 pieces of Senate budget bill language restricting funds pending reports on pages 9 and 10. The first requires a report on MDH staffing, including how staff will be aligned under the new facilities master plan. And the second requires reporting on MDH's ability to meet legislative mandates for court-involved admissions. Also on page 10, the subcommittee concurred with Senate narrative on creating uniform patient and staff safety measures at MDH facilities. In the Office of Healthcare Quality on page 12, the subcommittee concurred with Senate narrative to survey flu vaccination policies at Maryland hospitals and adopted narrative on complaints of patients with Alzheimer's in Maryland's nursing homes. Moving to the health professional boards and commissions, starting on page 13, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate's language restricting funds on the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists and the Board of Pharmacists pending reports on efforts to address repeat audit findings. On page 14, the subcommittee concurred with two pieces of Senate narrative pertaining to the board's performance measures and audit findings. The subcommittee also modified Senate narrative to include a comparison of costs for similar systems. On page 15 and 16, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in restricting funds from the Board of Nursing pending a report on efforts to resolve repeat audit findings, and in the inclusion of two pieces of narrative, one on the impact of the cybersecurity attack on the boards, and the other requesting a report from the Board of Nursing on the timely processing of investigations. Moving to the public health services on page 17 and 18, the subcommittee modified a Senate action request restricting funds pending a report on accreditation and recruitment under the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner to push the due date back to December 1st, 2022. Below this modification, beginning at the bottom of page 18, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate language to restrict funds pending a report on vacancy rates among public health personnel. In the Prevention and Health Promotion Administration on pages 20 and 21, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate on narrative requesting a report on mobile COVID-19 vaccine clinics and added language restricting funds pending a report on Medicaid claiming in-school-based health centers. On page 22, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt narrative requesting a report on higher education programs for OCME staff. Actions pertaining to the Behavioral Health Administration begin on page 23, where the subcommittee modified Senate language to add additional reporting requirements on the Administrative Services Organization. For the remaining BHA actions from page 24 to page 27, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in the following ways: adding language to evaluate the state's pre-admission screening and resident review program, adding language on provider reimbursement, adding narrative on telebehavioral health services and medication-assisted treatment, restricting the uses of the fiscal 2022 deficiency, and adding further annual language on provider reimbursements. The Developmental Disabilities Administration begins on page 28, with the subcommittee concurring with the Senate with Senate language restricting funds pending a report on the transition of the long-term services and support system. The subcommittee added language on page 29 restricting funds pending quarterly utilization reports, replacing narrative for this purpose that was adopted by the Senate on page 30. Also on page 30, the subcommittee concurred with Senate language restricting funds to the Community Services Program to only be used for that purpose. On the bottom of page 30 and continuing to page 31, the subcommittee adopted new narrative requesting demographic data for the individuals served by the DDA Community Services Programs. Moving to Medicaid, beginning on page 32 and continuing to page 33, the subcommittee concurred with two Senate actions restricting funds pending reports on the redetermination process and current Medicaid rates. On page 34, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on home and community-based services expansion. On page 35 and 36, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to add annual language and adopt two pieces of narrative requesting reports on MCO risk corridor settlements and community options waiver financial and registry data. Below on page 36 and continuing to page 37, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on rates for dental services. On pages 37 and 38, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to delete double budgeted federal funds provided in two deficiencies and add annual language under the Maryland Children's Health Program, or CHIP, MCHIP. Medicaid provider reimbursements for behavioral health services are on page 39 and 40 of this report, where the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in the following ways: adding annual language restricting private provider reimbursements, clarifying the use of the fiscal 2022 deficiency funding, and deleting double budgeted funds. In the Health Regulatory Commissions, beginning on page 41, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate language on the state's behavioral health crisis response system, which continues on to page 42. On pages 42 and 43, the subcommittee modified two pieces of Senate narrative. First, to include information on additional federal funding received by Maryland hospitals, and second, to consider race and ethnicity in the evaluation of the Maryland primary care program. The subcommittee also adopted new narrative on page 44 on the Maryland Consortium for Coordinated Community Supports. At this point, I'll turn it over to Delegate Valentino Smith to do the remainder of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actions pertaining to the Department of Human Services begin on page 45, where the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in annual language for the Maryland Legal Services Program. On pages 46 to 48 in the Social Services Administration, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in adding language restricting funds pending corrective action in regards to recent audit findings, and adopting three pieces of narrative. First, requesting a report on youth and out-of-home placements. Second, on the implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act. And third, on the establishment of a new foster care provider rate system. In the DHS Operations Office, on page 49 and 50, the subcommittee concurred with Senate narrative on the department's recruitment efforts and adopted new committee narrative on the use of contractual staff throughout the department. In the Office of Technology for Human Services, beginning on page 51, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate narrative requesting a report on MD Think's data capabilities. In local department operations, starting on page 52, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in adding two pieces of annual language restricting foster care maintenance payments and child welfare services funds to their respective purposes only. Below on page 52 and continuing to page 54, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate in adopting two pieces of narrative, one on child welfare caseload data, and the other examining the impacts of COVID-19 on child neglect and maltreatment reporting. However, the subcommittee has reconsidered and is replacing the narrative on child welfare caseload data with color page 1 that modifies the language to request additional data and express intent about child welfare positions. On page 55 and continuing on to page 57, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt four pieces of committee narrative in the assistance payments programs, requesting one, quarterly reports on application processing times, denial rates, and the reasons for case closure for public benefit programs. Two, reports on children served and participation rates through summer SNAP, and then spending for the pandemic EBT program to be identified separately in budget materials, and a report on the ongoing benefit Clift initiative for those exiting temporary cash assistance and job retention bonuses in the temporary cash assistance program. For DHS and Child Support Administration, beginning on page 58, the subcommittee concurred with two pieces of Senate narrative requesting data on enforcement actions and performance. The subcommittee also adopted two new pieces of committee narrative on page 59 and continuing to page 61 on participating in the Child Support Lean Network and the Child Support Management System. On page 62, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate to adopt committee narrative in the Family Investment Administration, requesting a report on planned changes to the educational and experience requirements for family investment specialist positions. The Office of Home Energy Programs actions are on page 63 and 64, where the subcommittee concurred with the Senate on all three items of narrative. One, on energy assistance application processing times. Two, implementation of categorical eligibility. And three, usage of federal funds for the low-income water assistance program. Lastly, in the Department of Housing and Community Development, on page 65, the subcommittee added narrative on the Homelessness Solutions Program, The subcommittee would like to adopt an additional piece of narrative not featured in this report and shown on color page number 2 on the adaptive reuse of vacant commercial space.
At this time, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the adoption of the subcommittee report as amended.
Second.
All right, are there anyone want to have discuss any of the items or pull out any of the recommendations for a separate vote? Okay, I see none. So we have a motion and a second to accept the report of Health and Social Services Subcommittee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chair, thank you very much for all your work. I want to, in particular, note that you have done great work through a very difficult time. That so much of the disruption that we saw in the pandemic came home to roost in your subcommittee. And so thank you very much for your diligence to all the members of the subcommittee for helping us as a committee and as a House of Delegates as a state work through these issues. Thank you so much. Okay, we're now going to move to the newest subcommittee chair, his maiden voyage and reporting out his committee findings. Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee. Delegate Bridges.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, this is my maiden voyage, and I'm really excited to get through my first report out. So thank you very much. And I also want to give a special thank you to the Vice Chair for being a mentor and assisting me through all these documents and meetings. Definitely appreciate it. Let me start by thanking my subcommittee members, the Vice Chair, Delegate Susie Proctor, Delegate Gabe Alcevero, and Delegate Mike McKay. Also want to thank our committee staff, Ken Weaver, and our committee support, Sherry Warhine. Finally, I'd like to thank our DLS budget analysts, Jacob Cash, Patrick Frank, Andrew Garrison, Jason Kramer, Madeline Miller, Kelly Norton, Grace Peterson, Morgan Smith, Caleb Weiss, and of course, Brett Ogden, who edited this document. So we'll begin on page 1 with the Judiciary, where the subcommittee concurred with reducing excess funds for judicial compensation enhancements and adopting 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the appointed attorney program and judgeship needs. On to page 2 and 3, the subcommittee concurred with the language restricting funds for the implementation of the Wolf v. Richmond and with adding funds for the Access to Counsel and Evictions program. The subcommittee also concurred with restricting funds pending a report on court performance measures and requesting quarterly reports on the Access to Counsel and Evictions program. On pages 4 and 5, the subcommittee concurred with reducing excess funds for circuit court clerk salaries and with restricting funds to increase circuit court clerk salaries pending the passage of legislation. The subcommittee also concurred with requesting a report on vacant properties, a report on major IT development projects, and adopted new committee narrative requesting a report on the rollout of Maryland electronic courts in Baltimore City. On page 6, for the Office of the Public Defender, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting 2 reports on attorney applicant hiring and separations and IT security. On page 7, for the Office of the Attorney General, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting 2 reports on the Independent Investigations Division and vacancies. On page 8, in the Uninsured Employers Fund, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending a report on the correction of audit findings. On page 9, in the Board of Public Works, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting reports on the Maryland Zoo and the Thurgood Marshall Center. On page 10, in the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs, the subcommittee concurred with requesting reports on training and outreach data and minority business enterprise participation, attainment, and liaison. Also on page 10, in the State Commission on Criminal Sentencing Policy, the subcommittee concurred with requesting a report on the evaluation of racial bias in sentencing. We'll now turn to the Governor's Office on Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. On page 11, the subcommittee modified the amount of restricted funds pending the submission of managing for results data. On page 12 through 15, the subcommittee adopted new language restricting funds for a grant and concurred with language restricting funds pending the submission of reports on the Victims of Crime Act grant program. On page 16, the subcommittee rejected narrative requesting a report on state support for police athletic leagues and concurred with requesting 2 reports on performance audit recommendations and the pretrial services grant fund. On page 17, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending a report violation of probation warrants in Baltimore City. On page 18, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting state aid for police protection funding and restricting funds pending a report on equitable policing. On pages 19 through 21, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on expenditures for children's programs and concurred with narrative requesting reports on state aid for police protection and sexual abuse and assault forensic services. On page 22, in the State Board of Elections, the subcommittee requested quarterly reports on the poll book major IT project. On pages 23 and 24 in the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, the subcommittee modified narrative to request a report on performance measures be submitted in consultation with the 911 Commission, adopt narrative requesting a report on the operations of the task force on preventing and countering domestic terrorism, and concurred with narrative requesting the inclusion of 911 revenue to the governor's budget. On page 25 in the Department of Veterans Affairs, the subcommittee concurred with restricting grant funds that provide revenue support to the contractor of Charlotte Hall's Veterans Homes, pending a report on the home's COVID-19 response. On pages 26 and 27 in the Comptroller of Maryland, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting 3 reports on major IT development projects, a newborn savings account study, and compliance with the National Incident-Based Reporting System. On page 28 in the State Department of Assessment and Taxation, the subcommittee concurred with requesting a report on staffing in the real property valuation program and report on the decline in eligible applicants for various tax credits. On page 29 in the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board, the subcommittee amended language restricting $50,000 pending the submission of a report on the appeals backlog in Prince George's County. On pages 30 through 32 in the Department of Information Technology, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting reports on managing for results, goals, and indicators, plans for additional cybersecurity funding, remote workforce IT projects, spending of federal cybersecurity grants, television tower resource sharing agreements, and use of funds for the new state chief data officer and state chief privacy officer. On page 33, in the Department of General Services, the subcommittee concurred with adopting 2 pieces of language, restricting funds to support effective management of facility maintenance projects and restricting funds pending a report on state center. On page 34, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting reports on the late reporting of emergency procurements and managing for results indicators for employee training. We'll now turn to the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. On pages 35 through 38, the subcommittee increased the amount restricted for the purpose of increasing employment within 2 administrative units and rejected a Senate action restricting funds pending a report on recovering unsupported payments made to the inmate medical contractor. The subcommittee also concurred with the narrative requesting reports on Justice Reinvestment Act, cost savings, recidivism, contraband, and requested a new report on overtime pay errors. On pages 39 and 40, the subcommittee concurred with restricting funds pending quarterly hiring and attrition reports and rejected a Senate action restricting funds to plan a pre-release facility for women. On pages 41 and 42, the subcommittee concurred with restricting funds pending a report on those victimized while on community supervision and modified narrative requesting a report on caseload ratios. On pages 43 and 44, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds for substance use disorder treatment and concurred with narrative requesting a report on inmate behavioral health. On pages 45 and 46 in the Department of Juvenile Services, the subcommittee concurred with requesting performance measures for educational outcomes and restricting funds for a report on the Baltimore City Strategic Partnership. On pages 47 through 49 in the Department of State Police, the subcommittee concurred with restricting new helicopter maintenance funding that was added in supplemental budget number 1 and modified narrative requesting a report on the implementation of a workforce diversity action plan. On pages 50 and 51, the subcommittee modified language to restrict additional funds pending the submission of an out-of-home placement reports. On pages 51 and 52, the subcommittee concurred with the language restricting funds pending the submission of the Unified Crime Report. On pages 52 and 53, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending the submission of a report on youth-centered behavioral health intervention and prevention programs. On pages 53 through 56, the subcommittee adopted language restricting funds pending submission of a report on home detention monitoring and adopted language restricting funds pending the submission of the fiscal 2023 pre-release unit for women progress report. And that concludes the report on the fiscal 2023 budget for the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee as amended. I ask that you move the adoption of the subcommittee report.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, very good. You did great. First time out of the gate.
Thank
Really
you.
good. Yeah. Members, does anyone want to pull out any of the recommendations to vote on them separately? Or do you have any discussion or further questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in support of adopting the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee report, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Very good. We're now gonna move to the last subcommittee report, Transportation and Environment Subcommittee. Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As always, I'd like to start by thanking my subcommittee members, of course, my vice chair, as well as Delegate Beitzel, Delegate Kittleman, Delegate Lewis, and Delegate Metzger. And of course, I have to note that this is Delegate Beitzel's last subcommittee report. He's been on the subcommittee since 2009 and has done a terrific job with us. And we appreciate his long years of service. And I also want to thank Vice Chair Chang, who's been sort of the fifth Beatle for our subcommittee this legislative session. So thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'd also like to thank our committee staff, Ken Weaver, and committee support, Cherie Wareheim. And finally, I'd like to thank our DLS budget analysis analysts, Andrew Gray, Emily Haskell, Steve McCulloch, Kelly Norton, and Samuel Quist, and of course, Katie Cannon, who edited this document. On page 1 in the Public Service Commission, the subcommittee concurred with Senate narrative requesting reports on complaints filed against utilities and on marketing practices of retail energy suppliers. On pages 2 and 3 in the Maryland Energy Administration, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting reports on the Strategic Energy Investment Fund and the Maryland Gas Expansion Fund, and also added language restricting funds in the Maryland Gas Expansion Fund to be used for bill pay assistance and arrearage retirement. On page 4 in the Department of Planning, the subcommittee concurred with the Senate on a Maryland 250 Commission funding report. On page 5 in the Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the incentive compensation for its employees. On pages 6 and 7 in the Maryland Department of Transportation, the subcommittee concurred with annual language requiring notification of changes to the capital program and establishing a position cap for the department. On pages 8 and 9 in the Secretary's office, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting operating grants and aid to the amount budgeted and requiring notification of changes to the capital program. On pages 10 through 11 in MDOT debt service requirements, the subcommittee added 3 pieces of annual language establishing debt limits for traditional and non-traditional debt and requiring a report on non-traditional debt issuances. On page 12 for the State Highway Administration, the subcommittee restricted funding for a road project and adopted narrative requesting a report on installation of suicide prevention barriers on a bridge. On page 13 and on page 14 in the Maryland Port Administration, the subcommittee restricted funding for the Maryland Transportation Authority, pending the submission of a report on a performance audit of the Easy Pass program. On page 15 in the Motor Vehicle Administration, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on privacy concerns related to digital driver's licenses. On pages 16 through 19 in the Maryland Transit Administration, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending reports on paratransit policies and procedures related to late ride pickups, and cellular and broadband availability in transit stations and along transit alignments. The subcommittee also modified language restricting funds pending a report on hiring and retention efforts for hard-to-fill positions. In addition, we added language restricting funds pending status reports on the Purple Line construction, concurred with narrative expressing intent on technical assistance, and adopted narrative on light rail crossing safety. On page 20, the Maryland Aviation Administration, the subcommittee concurred with language restricting funds pending a report on the airport noise zone. On page 21 in the Maryland Transportation Authority, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on tolling issues. On pages 22 through 25 in the Department of Natural Resources, the subcommittee adopted narrative on a female black bear population report and added 2 pieces of language restricting funding pending the submission of reports on natural resources police hiring and promotion and the condition and needs of the 16 state lakes. The subcommittee also concurred with language restricting funds pending the submission of the 2010 Trust Fund Annual Work and Expenditures Plan and with narrative on the Chesapeake Bay restoration spending by program. On page 26 in the Maryland Department of Agriculture, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on integrated pest management in schools. Moving on to the Maryland Department of the Environment on pages 27 through 29, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending the submission of the scrap tire annual report, and the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a report on the reduction of operating costs and greenhouse gas emissions through district energy, and with language restricting funds pending the correct budgeting of personnel expenses. On page 30 in the Maryland Environmental Service, the subcommittee concurred with narrative requesting a funding statement report. On page 31, the subcommittee concurred with a section restricting funds pending the submission of a report on Chesapeake Bay restoration, historical, and projected spending. And finally, on page 33, the subcommittee added a section restricting funds pending the submission of a report on enforcement and inspection positions in the Maryland Department of the Environment and Maryland Department of Agriculture. Madam Chair, that concludes the subcommittee's actions on the fiscal 2023 budget, and I would move the subcommittee report as amended.
Okay, second. All right. Delegate Valentino Smith, do you have a question before we vote?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the work of your subcommittee and certainly your expertise in this area. I was not able to fully read the entire transportation budget. Did your subcommittee take any information on whether or not the state budget contains anything with respect to the proposed maglev project?
The state budget does not contain anything with respect to the proposed maglev project, other than the fact that, the state is sort of the pass-through for some federal funding that's been percolating for quite a while, but there's no new state fund appropriation for maglev in the state budget.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Delegate Beitzel.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to pull out on page 5 the provision that provides for $10 million for the purpose of funding a system in Great Mills in St. Mary's County. Could we pull that out for a separate vote?
I think that's page 12.
Page 12, correct.
Okay.
And then there was another one I'd like to pull out with the Department of Natural Resources. I think it's a diversity issue with the natural. I forget what I did. I lost it when I was going through on the page number. It's under Department of Natural Resources.
I think that's page 22, Delegate, just before the one about the state lakes.
Okay, well, that's
So page 12 and 22.
page 12 and 22.
Correct, Delegate Foreman?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So I have a motion favorable and a second to adopt the report from Transportation and Environment with holding these 2 pages. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we're gonna now vote on the 2 pages separately. Page 12 is a $10 million expenditure on transit project in St. Mary's. Am I right about that?
It's a road project, Madam Chair.
Road project? Okay,
I'm just trying to fund some roads.
I got it. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Well, I'm trying to get it here, Madam Chair.
You want to just hold your hand up?
I got it. Yeah.
In the
You?
opposition, we
Yeah.
have delegates Beitzel, Novotny.
Okay. Page 22, which is the, as I recall, diversity report. I think we had a bill. We have not done the bill. This is a report that you've included in your committee request to them, okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3.
In the opposition, we have delegates Mangione, Beitzel, Novotny.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very good. Thank you very much. We're now going to move to pay-go. So I'll go back to Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the members of the subcommittee, Vice Chair Chang, Delegate Bridges, Delegate Geist, Delegate Corman, Delegate Metzger, Delegate Proctor, Delegate Resnick, and Delegate Young. Also like to thank committee staff Michelle Lambert, the budget analyst Andrew Gray, Emily Haskell, Laura Hyde, Matthew Klein, Madeline Miller, and Kelly Norton, and Caitlin Cannon, who edited this document. Turning to the actions of the subcommittee on pages 1 and 2 of the Department of Natural Resources, the subcommittee rejected the Senate language restricting funding until the submission of quarterly project reports. Instead, the subcommittee added language that allocates a portion of the Baltimore City Direct Grant to certain projects and requires a report by Baltimore City Recreation and Parks on the Patterson Park Inc. ice rink and swimming pool assessment. On pages 3 and 4 in the Department of Housing and Community Development, the subcommittee concurred with the language added by the Senate restricting funds in Project Core for specific projects and restricting funding for the Home Ownership Works Program pending submission of regulations. That concludes the subcommittee report. Move adoption of the subcommittee report as amended.
Okay. Any, I'll second that. Any questions or concerns? Okay. On the report, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. Thank you very much. Again, Delegate Lawrence. We're now going to move to the Vice Chair, Delegate Chang, for the full committee items.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Move on to the full committee decision document. First, we have the payments to civil divisions of the state.
Yeah, on page 1 is payments to civil divisions of the state. DLS recommended concurring. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Next.
On page 2 is the budget for the Maryland General Assembly. DLS had recommended concurring with the budget as approved by the Legislative Policy Committee. The Senate adopted this position. We would recommend that you just hold until you complete all of your actions at the end.
Is there a motion?
To hold.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next.
Beginning on page 3 is the Department of Budget and Management, Office of the Secretary. The first item is the recommendation from DLS to adopt committee narrative requesting budget details be submitted on grants and contracts. The agency concurred and the Senate adopted.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next.
For item 2, DLS recommended restricting $250,000 for 2 reports on American Rescue Plan Act funding, or ARPA. The agency agreed to provide the information but disagreed with the restriction of funds. The Senate modified this action on the following page to require additional information in the second report.
Is there a motion?
Motion to accept.
Right.
There a second? All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item.
On pages 5 through 7, items 3 and 4 are recommendations to alter and add budget bill language as submitted in order to limit the amount of appropriations that can be placed into contingency reserves and to disallow the transfer of restricted items in the budget. The agency disagreed with these recommendations, but the Senate adopted them.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next item.
Starting on page 7, continuing through page 14, items 5 through 10 are recommendations for annual budget bill language that the agency concurred with and the Senate adopted. If adopted, these items would require forecasts to be submitted for the General Fund, Transportation Trust Fund, Higher Education Funds, and Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund. Apply across the board reductions to institutions of higher education. They would require details be submitted on federal grant accounts and appropriations, set policies for using federal funds responsibly, provide for consistent reporting of budget data, and provide for the consistent reporting of interagency agreements.
Move to concur with all of these items, Mr. Chair.
There a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
On page 14, item 11 is a recommendation for annual budget bill language defining the budget amendment process and how amendments may be used. The agency concurred and the Senate adopted. However, there is a color page item for your consideration, starting on page 17 and continuing on to page 20, that would add a provision altering the budget amendment process for certain federal funds available by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Move to reject the Senate and adopt the color page, Mr. Vice Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
Starting on page 20, continuing on to page 22, item 12 would add budget bill language requiring certain accounting systems be maintained and their disbursements be reported on. The agency concurred and the Senate adopted.
Move to
Is there a
concur.
motion? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
On page 22 or 23, there is a new action adopted by the Senate, which requests a report on Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funds.
Move
Is
to
there a
concur.
motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
On page 24 in the Department of Budget and Management Personnel, item number 1 is language that would restrict funds pending a rebasing of state employee salary scales. The agency concurred, the first house adopted. However, on the next page, on page 25, is a color page item that is essentially the same language, with the exception that it adds the Maryland Department of Transportation as also having to rebase their salary scales, or produce a report that would rebase on rebasing salary scales.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion on the color page?
Move to adopt the color page.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
Item number 2, beginning on page 26, is language that would restrict funds pending the development of a process for annual salary reviews. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
Items 3, 4, and 5, beginning on page 27 and going through page 29, are all annual committee narrative requesting reporting on health insurance information. The agency concurred with all 3 and the first house adopted all 3.
Move to concur
Motion on
with
the
items
items.
3, 4, and 5, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
Item number 6 on page 29 is annual language requiring reporting on workers' compensation information. The agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
Items 7, 8, and 9, beginning on page 30 and continuing on through page 33, are all annual language that impose restrictions and have reporting requirements on the creation and abolition of state positions. The agency concurred with all 3 of these items and the first house adopted.
there a motion?
Move to concur with all of these items.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
Item number 10 on pages 33 and 34 is annual language requiring reporting on the health insurance account. For the agency concurred and the first house adopted.
The motion on the language.
Move to concur.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
In the state retirement agency on page 35, DLS recommended concurring, the agency concurred. The first house instead adopted the color page that you see on page 36, requiring reporting on COVID-related disability claims.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next item.
On page 37 is an additional color page item in the state retirement agency for you to consider. This is committee narrative requesting a report on the impact of allowing more flexibility in retirement dates for state pension systems.
Is there a motion?
Move to adopt that.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
On page 38 in the Maryland supplemental retirement plans, DLS recommended concurring. First house, the agency concurred and the first house adopted.
Is there a motion?
Move to concur.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
On page 39 is the budget for public debt. DLS recommended concurring with the governor's allowance. The agency concurred and the Senate adopted.
Motion on public debt.
Move to concur.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. Next item.
On page 40 is the recommendation for the State Reserve Fund. DLS recommended concurring with the governor's allowance. The agency concurred with this. The Senate instead rejected the DLS recommendation and added the language that you see that begins on page 41 and goes through the remainder of the document. It restricts $1.3 billion, the $2.4 billion appropriation for a variety of measures. You should have an additional document in your materials that has a cover page titled Fencing Packet.
Yes.
Provides you with the first 2 pages are a summary list of the House's proposal for what is to be funded and fenced out of the rainy day fund. It is a total of $1.37 billion, so a little bit more in additional funding. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, how you'd like to go through the discussion of the list. We can go item by item or where there are differences and additions. The rest of the packet includes more detail on the PAYGO programs that are funded through the language, and then also provides you with the actual amendment itself.
Right. I think, I don't know if it's Dave or you that's going to go through the packet talking about what the Senate did and what we've added. Is that correct, Michelle?
Yeah, Rebecca, if you can go through that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Right, thanks.
Great. So we'll work from the list itself rather than the amendment, just because it's easier that way. So you can see that both the House and the Senate are in agreement on shifting $700 million in capital projects from the GO budget into PAYGO, which allows you additional capacity in the GO budget for additional projects. There is you're in agreement with $104.8 million to provide rate increases for all of the providers for nursing homes, Medicaid, community-based services, et cetera. There's agreement on $75 million to provide one-time assistance to hospitals for workforce support. There's a difference between the House and the Senate. The Senate restricted $50 million to fund apprenticeship programs in both the public and private sector. You are not funding that at all. You are in agreement to fund $50 million in arts and tourism grants. An additional $50 million, you're in agreement to provide an increase in the TCA and TDAP grants of $65 per individual. There's agreement to fund $40 million to reduce the waiting list for the autism waiver. There's currently about 6,000 individuals on that wait list, although eligibility of all of those individuals has yet to be determined. The way that this is structured is that $10 million would go to MSDE in fiscal 2023, and an additional $30 million would go to the dedicated purpose account to allow for the multi-year ramp up of an additional 1,800 slots total. And the language also directs MDH and MSDE to submit an application for an addendum to the current waiver to increase slots by that amount. You're in agreement to restrict $32.9 million to provide expanded dental coverage for Medicaid participants. You're in agreement to provide $25 million in COVID relief for assisted living facilities and an additional $25 million to nursing home assistance. There is a difference from the Senate. The Senate is providing $20 million to the Western Maryland Economic Future Investment Program. Your language would provide $10 million for that purpose. You're in agreement to provide $20 million to help make VOCA victim service provider whole at a total of $50 million fiscal 2023. You're in agreement to provide $18 million for the climate solutions implementation. You are providing an additional $4 million towards the paid family leave legislation. You're in agreement to dedicate $10 million to increasing and expanding the historic revitalization tax credit. You're in agreement to spend $10 million on implementing a strategic plan for the universities of Shady Grove. You're in agreement for the allocation of $8.9 million towards childcare funding, including stabilization grants and increased rates and scholarship programs. There is a difference between the House and the Senate in terms of the amount of funds needed to provide a $500 bonus to non-certified education support professionals. This increases funding for that to an even $8 million. There's $5 million provided by both chambers for Mental Health 988, $5 million to SMWOBA for their fund managers, $5 million for pediatric cancer research, $5 million for the Maryland Core program, $4 million for loan assistance repayment programs for physicians and nurses, $4 million for non-public special education teacher salaries, $3.5 million for enhanced Alzheimer's services and research, $3.4 million to go along with legislation that establishes a gun center within the Maryland State Police, $2.5 million to provide grants to organizations that help support violence prevention and interruption, $1.2 million to go along with legislation that would create a grant program for formerly incarcerated youth. You slightly increased the amount of funding provided in addition to the Bernie program, including a $40,000 earmark for Southeast CDC. You're in agreement for $1 million to the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund, $1 million in 3 positions in additional funding provided to the Treasurer's Office, $1 million to support marketing and outreach for the general election given to the State Board of Elections, $600,000 to go along with legislation relating to prosecutorial transparency reporting, a $500,000 to help support a redevelopment plan for State Center in Baltimore City. Continuing on to the next page, there's also agreement about additional funding provided to the Department of Public Safety to fund positions to help with internal reviews regarding offenders who are under supervision and involved in murders. And then a small amount of funding provided to the Maryland New Start Act, also contingent on legislation. The remaining items on this list reflect additions by the Appropriations Committee. There is $46.5 million in funds fenced for cannabis reform. This reflects just a portion of the total package. I believe there is additional actions relating to the Judiciary and the General Assembly that we will get into, which is why that budget was held when it came up earlier. This would provide $40 million to the Department of Labor for the Business Assistance Fund, and then $5 million to the Department of Health for the Cannabis Public Health Fund, and then $1.5 million to the Department of Public Safety in order to increase their IT costs associated with implementing the changes to the expungement laws. There is $4.5 million allocated to the LEAP program, $5 million provided for the purchase of license plate readers, $5 million to provide funding to the Homeowner Protection Fund, $3.5 million contingent on legislation relating to the Abortion Care Clinical Training Care Fund, an additional $3 million provided to the local management boards, $3 million to domestic violence centers, a $2.3 million operating grant to the Center for Neuroscience of Social Injustice at the Kennedy Krieger Institute, $2 million to support a pilot project that uses the novel police firearm data, $2 million to the Greater Baltimore Regional Integrated Crisis System, $1.5 million to the Children's National Hospital, additional funding of $1.2 million to the Maryland School for the Blind to allow them to begin implementing a new pay plan, $1 million to increase grants to police departments to provide coordination across jurisdictions, an additional $1 million provided to expand the ROCA program beyond Baltimore City, $1 million to provide a grant to the Vision for Baltimore program, $750,000 operating grant to Thread to support community and academic support for youth, a little less than $600,000 to provide an additional grant to the Schaefer Center for Public Policy, $500,000 to the Pride of Baltimore, and then some additional funding to hire a project specialist to support the Maryland Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ruff. We have a question from Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman. I have a question. I don't know if it's a typo or a correction, but if you look at the fence list for the percent increase in Medicaid rates, on the Senate list, it says 4%. On the House list, it says 2%, but the number is exactly the same. Is that a typographical error?
That is an error in the list. Yes, thank you. If you look at page 7, in the actual amendment itself, it is a 4% increase, and it's over and above the 4%.
Correct.
That were already provided in the budget.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Ruff? Delegate Grice.
Thank you. How are we going to go about pulling these out? Because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of items in this fencing list that some of us are adamantly opposed to spending money on. How did you want to take care of this?
We could move to adopt the state reserve or make a motion on the state reserve fund, and we can pull the items out.
Okay. Did you want to wait to do that? Do you want to take that vote first, or?
Sure, we could take that vote first and then pull the items out.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead. You want to make a motion?
Sure. Make a motion to modify and to adopt the fencing items listed in the state reserve fund.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
All right, now why don't we
Actually, let me go back to committee council.
I think it's preferred that you pull the items out that you would like to pull out.
So pull the items out first.
If I may offer a suggestion, I think with the minority party, we'll probably all agree on whatever we pull out. So I have several here, and if anyone wants to add any to the list, I'll certainly support that. I think it'll just make things much easier for you.
very good. Thank you. So why don't you go ahead and list those you want pulled out?
All right, I'll start. The increased monthly temporary cash assistance, would be one. Climate Solutions Now Act, Time to Care Act. And any of the abortion related line items, certainly we want to pull out as well.
I only see one there. Am I correct, Michelle? There's only one on abortion?
Yes. So
Okay.
There's only one, sir. Yes, okay.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, so we'll take you want to take the votes individually or all together?
Well, let
I'm sorry.
me see first if there are any others, okay? Any others? All right, well, let's take a vote on those. I'm gonna move favorable on those items. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Raise your hand so we can get a vote of opposition. Beitzel, you went off camera. Okay, gotcha.
In the opposition, we have delegates McKay, Geist, Mangione, Metzger, Beitzel.
We lose Novotny? We must have, okay.
And Kittleman.
And
I don't see Novotny or Kittleman.
Okay,
Delegate Novotny is here. I can see him. And he voted no.
he did?
Mhm.
Ooh. Okay.
I didn't see his hand.
Delegate Novotny, you voted no?
Madam Chair, I don't see Delegate Novotny.
I don't see him at all.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. My fault.
Okay, we have,
that skinny guy.
we have two absent. Is that right? So,
Yes, 2 absent. And in the opposition, we have delegates McKay, Delegate Metzger, Delegate Beitzel, and Delegate Mangione.
all right. Are there any others you want pulled out? Okay. That was relatively painless.
And move the rest of the fences, Madam Chair.
All right. All
Second.
those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay. No? Do I get to make the motion?
There's a few more items to consider, sorry.
Yeah, I know. Rebecca, you always stop me. Go ahead.
Don't mean to stand in your way, but
No.
I'll appreciate these things. You should have a single page that is printed front and back. These are these are items that were requested as part of funding your priorities package, but because they are in the Judiciary and in the General Assembly budgets, you have the ability to add those funds directly to those appropriations. So the one side, COOA, is the Judiciary. And there are 2 pieces of language that would add $3 million to the district court budget, providing authorization that they be reallocated as necessary. But this would provide the Judiciary with the funding that's been identified as being needed in order to expediently implement the cannabis legislation. And then there is also language that would add $2.5 million in the Administrative Office of the Courts in order to provide Maryland Legal Services Corporation with funding and resources to be able to educate individuals on the new cannabis laws and to provide assistance with expungements as a result of the legislation. Both of these pieces of legislation are contingent on enactment of HB 837 as well as the ratification of the constitutional amendment.
Any discussion on those? Readiness to vote? Shall we vote on Vice Chair? All those?
Favor.
Yeah, have we got a motion favorable?
Moved. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Good. And the second one?
Delegate Grace, are you in the opposition?
Opposed.
Sorry, yes, I am. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Rebecca.
For B75, sorry, I realized I went out of budget code order. In the Maryland General Assembly, there's two pieces of language. The first would add $250,000 to have DLS conduct a disparity study. This is also in relation to the cannabis legislation. The second one would add $750,000 in general funds to the DLS budget in order to help support the operations and consultant fees associated with the commission on the establishment of a family medical leave and insurance program.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
For a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
We have two opposed.
In the opposition, we have delegates Mangione and Gray.
Okay.
I have nothing further.
Delegate McKay, are you also in the opposition?
Yes, please. Yes,
And
please.
Beitzel.
In the opposition, we have delegates McKay, Beitzel. Asper, are you in opposition?
No, I have a question, but go ahead.
Delegates McKay, Beitzel, Metzger, and Mangione are in the opposition.
Yes, Delegate Asaveri, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to see as far as like possibly abstaining on these.
You don't have to vote on them. You
Okay,
can pass, okay?
thank you.
So Mark?
Yes, ma'am.
Delegate Asaveri is pass.
Okay. Delegate Asavero, which votes?
On the last two that we
The last
talked
two.
about related to, correct. That's related to the cannabis piece of it and contingent upon the HBA 37.
Committee has noted. Thank you, Delegate Asavero.
Thank
Ms. Roth?
you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. I think we're ready. All right, do I hear a motion to move favorable on Senate Bill 290 as amended?
Move the
by
budget.
House Appropriations Committee.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good. Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments, if I may, before we go to the floor. First and foremost, I think we do need to give Michelle Lambert, June Chung, and Ken Weaver a round of applause for all the work that they have done on our behalf. And on my staff, Dana Phillips, and certainly Cherie Warheim, you've done, again, a wonderful job. So thank you so much. I think we've already thanked, but I'll say it again, all of the DLS subcommittee coordinators and the budget analysts, support staff that help the subcommittees through the decision-making process. A special shout out to Rebecca Ruff and to Dave Romans, who guide us through this process every year. And I want to also, lift up, if I may, the vice chair of this committee, Mark Chang, for a wonderful job he's done this year. Not only today, but all throughout the year in our bill hearings and so on and so forth. And as you know, Mark floats around to all the different subcommittees and really is, I think, the kind of glue that keeps us all together and moving forward. I want to say a couple words about the budget we're about ready to take out to the floor, because I've said to you in the past, and I'm still hopeful, that we will have a budget this year that moves forward, that has tax relief for our citizens, that has really important capital projects that we will be rolling out after this budget goes through the floor, that has really good, as you can see, support behind the kinds of assistance that's still needed as we lift ourselves out of this pandemic. I mean, just to name a couple, the assistance to the arts and tourism, assistance to the hospitals, the assistance we're giving workforce. I mean, there is a number of things that I could lift up and say, these are important things that we've done in this budget. I wish I could say we're done. We're not. We are in really very close agreement with the Senate. And we're going to move through and go to a conference committee where we will always, as we do always, iron out any differences. I am here to say that the House is still committed, as is the Senate, to working towards figuring out how much of the money that we have at hand we can spend on tax relief, because there is absolutely a desire in both houses and the administration to do that. We're still in conversation. We're getting much closer to a decision, but that decision has not yet been made. So I just want to assure everyone that there is very good intentions on the part of the appropriations leadership to continue working in that regard. And I hope, by the way, that those of you in the minority party feel that myself, our vice chair, and all the subcommittee chairs have kept you very informed as we have moved along this process. So with that, I just want to thank everyone. We acknowledged a couple of people, Delegate Beitzel, who has been a long time member of this committee and is not going to be back with us next year. I want to acknowledge you. There are others that will not be back next year with us on this committee. I think that guy named McKay is running for something different. Other people are going to be running for other offices. But I will just tell you that, and of course, I do want to mention someone else, Delegate Krim, who has not been with us because she's on a medical leave. Look, this has been and is just the best committee in the House. And yes, we're now going to be on YouTube and everybody can hear me say that. You're a great committee. You work very hard. You care deeply about your constituents, but more importantly, you care deeply about every constituent in the state. And that's what makes Appropriations Committee really special. We're not here just for ourselves or for our district. We're here for every corner of the state of Maryland. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all of you for all your hard work. It's not done yet. We're going to have one heck of a conference committee. Won't be so bad, but it's always fun. And we'll take this budget to the floor. And I thank all of you. I particularly want to thank, by the way, also Delegate Grice for your leadership this year. Thank you.